Her brother struck her beneath the portrait of the mother who had ordered him to do it. Lady Eliza Harcourt collapsed beside the unsigned confession they intended to force from her, a confession declaring that she had forged her marriage settlement and deceived the Duke of Blackmere. Her mother watched without pity. Once you sign, His Grace will be free of you. But before Edmund could force the pen between Eliza's fingers, the doors opened. The silent Duke entered alone. 6 months earlier, Nathaniel had chosen scandal over his wife's word and sent her back to this house without examining the evidence. Now, he saw what that choice had cost her. He crossed the room, lifted Eliza into his arms, and carried her away without asking forgiveness. At the threshold, however, she opened her bruised hand and showed him a torn strip of parchment bearing his seal. "They did not merely want me gone," she whispered. "They needed your wife declared a criminal before midnight." Nathaniel stopped so abruptly that the servants behind him nearly collided. His gaze moved from the fragment in her palm to the long-case clock in the entrance hall. 20 minutes remained before 12. A muscle tightened along his jaw, but no words came. Since a French sabre had damaged his throat at Waterloo, every sentence cost him pain, and society had mistaken that pain for coldness. Eliza knew better. She also knew silence had become his refuge whenever truth demanded courage. "The carriage," he said at last, his voice little more than torn velvet. Edmund followed them into the hall. "You cannot remove her. She confessed to stealing from the Harcourt Trust." Nathaniel turned without lowering Eliza. The look he gave Edmund made the younger man halt on the final stair. "Unsigned," the Duke answered. One word, but it stripped the lie of its dignity. Lady Harcourt descended behind her son, composed and pale beneath the candlelight. "Your Grace, my daughter is unwell. Her behavior has grown irrational since you returned her to us. If you take her now, you risk attaching your name to whatever crimes she has committed." Nathaniel looked down at Eliza's split lip and the dark marks circling her wrist. Shame moved across his face, not because her mother had accused her, but because his own order had placed her within their reach. 6 months earlier, a packet of letters had appeared in his library, each suggesting Eliza had falsified clauses in their settlement to secure an estate belonging to his widowed sister. Eliza had begged him to compare the signatures. He had refused. Furious at what he believed was betrayal, he had placed her in her brother's carriage and instructed her family to keep her away from Blackmere until his solicitor completed an inquiry. No inquiry had ever reached her. Instead, every letter she sent had vanished. "You told them to imprison me," Eliza whispered. Nathaniel flinched. "I told them to shelter you." Men often choose kinder words for the harm their orders cause. The truth landed harder than any accusation Edmund could have made. Nathaniel carried her through the open doors and into the rain. His carriage waited beneath the stone portico, its lamps illuminating the wet steps and the Blackmere crest painted upon the door. As the footman opened it, Eliza twisted in Nathaniel's arms. "My writing case." "Leave it," he said. "I cannot. The original settlement is not inside it, but something more dangerous is." Before Nathaniel could question her, a crash sounded from the drawing room. Orange light flashed behind the windows. Smoke curled beneath the ceiling. Edmund had thrown the papers into the fire. Nathaniel set Eliza carefully inside the carriage, stripped off his gloves, and turned toward the house. She seized his sleeve. "That is what they want. If you go back, they will delay you until midnight." She placed the torn parchment against the carriage lamp. A row of tiny punctures appeared beside the wax seal, nearly invisible until the light shone through them. "My father taught me to copy legal documents using a pricked pattern and charcoal dust. This was not torn from a letter. It came from a template used to reproduce your signature." Nathaniel stared at the marks. "For what?" "A petition declaring our marriage fraudulent. At midnight, the trustees meet at Ashcombe Chapel. If they accept that petition, my mother gains control of the dowry lands, and Edmund gains the tenant rents held in trust. My seal, taken from the signet you reported missing after our wedding." The Duke's expression hardened as the clock inside the house began to strike. Once, twice. The horses shifted nervously. Nathaniel climbed into the carriage and struck the roof with his cane. "Ashcombe Chapel," he ordered. The coachman snapped the reins. As the carriage lurched into the darkness, Eliza looked back and saw Edmund standing beneath the portico, no longer pretending anger. He was smiling. She counted the chimes fading behind them. 11, 12. Her breath caught. We are too late. Nathaniel closed his hand around the forged fragment, but Eliza noticed something that made her blood turn cold. The wax was still warm. Whoever intended to present the petition at Ashcombe Chapel had not left Harcourt House before them. That person was already inside the Duke's carriage. Eliza did not scream. She lowered her eyes toward the velvet seat opposite them, where a narrow line of mud darkened the carpet beneath the folded travelling blanket. Nathaniel followed her gaze. The carriage had been waiting under the portico for less than 3 minutes. Yet the wet footprints led from the door to the space beneath the rear-facing seat, and did not lead back. He raised one finger to his lips, then reached slowly for the sword cane resting beside his knee. Before he could draw it, the blanket shifted. A small hand emerged first, clutching a leather document case against a grey servant's dress. "Please do not strike me, Your Grace." Nathaniel pulled the blanket away and revealed a trembling girl of perhaps 17, her cheeks streaked with soot. Eliza recognized her at once. Clara. The kitchen maid had secretly brought water to Eliza's locked room during her first week at Harcourt House, but 3 days later, Lady Harcourt claimed the girl had been dismissed for theft. "I thought Edmund sent you away. He locked me in the old laundry because I saw Mr. Vale copying your husband's letters." Clara looked toward the carriage window, as if expecting pursuit. "The fire gave me a chance to escape. I climbed into this carriage when the footman ran inside." She held out the case. The brass clasp had been broken, and a portion of the Blackmere crest had been scraped from its lid. "Mr. Vale ordered me to burn this. I could not." Nathaniel accepted the case but did not open it. "Who is Vale?" Each word tightened his damaged throat. "My mother's solicitor," Eliza answered. "He prepared the trust after my father died." Clara shook her head. "Not only Lady Harcourt's solicitor. I heard him tell Lord Edmund that he has served Blackmere for years." Nathaniel's expression changed. "Impossible." "Is it?" Eliza asked quietly. "Who brought you the letters accusing me?" He looked away for a fraction of a second, and that hesitation was answer enough. "Vale delivered them," he admitted. Eliza leaned back against the leather squabs as the truth rearranged. 6 months of suffering. Nathaniel had not found the accusations in his library by chance. A solicitor connected to both families had placed them directly in his hands, knowing his pride would do the rest. "Open the case," she said. Inside lay a stack of copied correspondence, 3 sheets of unused Blackmere stationery, a pouch of charcoal dust, and a small wooden frame pierced with hundreds of fine holes. Beneath them rested a ledger bound in blue calfskin. Eliza touched its cover but did not remove it. Her father had used identical books for trust accounts, numbering every page by hand so none could be replaced unnoticed. "This is not the original ledger," she said. "How can you know?" Nathaniel asked. "My father never used blue binding for principal accounts. Blue marked temporary copies sent to beneficiaries." She opened the book and ran her thumb across the first page. "And these numbers were written before the names. See where the ink overlaps? Someone created withdrawals first and added recipients afterward." Nathaniel studied the entries. Several payments appeared beside Eliza's name, including one for £8,000 issued 3 days after she had been confined at Harcourt House. "You could not have collected this. That was never the point. They needed records suggesting I had drained the trust. Your accusation made the lie believable." The carriage struck a rut, throwing Clara against the door. Outside, hoofbeats rose through the rain. A lantern appeared behind them, then another. Edmund had sent riders. Nathaniel slid the forged papers back into the case and struck the roof twice. The coachman urged the horses faster, but the road to Ashcombe narrowed between high stone walls. "There is another route," Eliza said. "At the ruined toll house, turn east through St. Anne's Wood." Nathaniel frowned. "That road ends at the river." "It appears to. My father funded a tenant's bridge beyond the mill, but it was never added to the county maps. He used it when floods closed the southern road." For the first time that night, Nathaniel looked at her, not as a woman to be rescued, but as the only person who understood the ground beneath them. "Tell the coachman." Eliza opened the front hatch and gave the directions. Behind them, Edmund's riders drew closer. A pistol cracked. The rear window shattered, scattering glass across Nathaniel's shoulder. He covered Eliza and Clara with his body as a second ball buried itself in the carriage frame. "They are not trying to delay us," Clara gasped. They are trying to kill us. No, Eliza said, examining the bullet hole. It had entered high, far above where any passenger's chest would have been. The riders wanted fear, not bodies. They are driving us toward the chapel. Nathaniel understood. Then the meeting is a trap. Eliza looked again at the blue ledger. If Vale had wanted it destroyed, Clara would never have been able to steal it so easily. Every document in the case accused Eliza, yet each contained flaws obvious to someone trained in accounts. It was evidence designed to be discovered. This case is the trap, she said. If we present it, they will claim I created every forgery myself. Clara's face went white. Then I have ruined everything. No. Eliza took the frightened girl's hand. You have given us something they did not intend to surrender. She lifted the wooden copying frame toward the lamp. One corner bore a dark crescent where the craftsman had burned his mark into the wood. Eliza had seen that symbol before, not in her mother's house, but inside Nathaniel's private study at Blackmere. Who has access to the locked cabinet beside your desk? She asked. Nathaniel's silence returned, but this time it carried horror rather than avoidance. Only my secretary, he said. A violent blow struck the carriage door. The latch sprang open, and a masked rider reached inside, not for the ledger, but for Clara. Nathaniel moved before the masked rider could close his fingers around Clara's arm. He caught the man's wrist, twisted it against the carriage frame, and drove the brass handle of his sword cane into the rider's knuckles. The man cried out, but the pounding hooves kept him level with the carriage. His other hand reached beneath his coat. Eliza saw the pistol and seized the leather case. She swung it with both hands, striking him across the face just as he fired. The shot tore through the carriage roof. Nathaniel wrenched the weapon from him and shoved him backward. The rider vanished beneath the rain, followed by the violent scream of a horse losing its footing. Drive! Nathaniel shouted through the broken hatch. The carriage turned so sharply at the ruined toll house that its left wheels lifted from the road. Clara fell against Eliza, and the blue ledger slid beneath Nathaniel's boots. Behind them, Edmund's remaining riders overshot the hidden entrance to St. Anne's Wood. Their lanterns continued along the main road before halting and wheeling back. The mistake bought only minutes. Nathaniel closed the carriage door and examined Eliza's hands. Fresh blood crossed her palm, where broken glass had cut the skin. You are hurt. Not enough to stop. She pulled her hand away before he could wrap it in his handkerchief. Do not mistake carrying me from that house for repairing what placed me there. Pain moved across his features, but he did not defend himself. He bound the wound only after she held out her hand by choice. You asked who enters my study, he said. My secretary is Mr. Julian Cross. He managed my correspondence while I was in France and remained with me after I returned. Did Cross know you intended to investigate the settlement? He suggested the inquiry. Eliza gave a bitter laugh. And when I wrote to you from Harcourt House? Nathaniel looked toward the darkness beyond the shattered window. He told me no letters had arrived. Clara made a small sound. I saw Lord Edmund give Mr. Vale a bundle tied with green ribbon. There were perhaps 20 letters. Eliza closed her eyes. Every message she had written to Nathaniel had been tied with green ribbon because it was the only ribbon Clara could steal from the kitchen stores without being noticed. She had filled those pages with dates, names, copied figures, and desperate appeals. Nathaniel had never read a single word. They knew I had discovered the false withdrawals, she said. That is why they needed you to send me away. At Blackmere, I had access to the tenant rolls and your account books. At my mother's house, they controlled every door. Nathaniel's voice roughened, and I gave them the key. Eliza met his eyes. Yes, he accepted the judgment without looking away. The carriage descended through the wood until the trees opened beside a black, swollen river. Ahead, the tenant's bridge stretched between the banks, narrow and unguarded. The coachman slowed. Your Grace. The water is nearly over the boards. Edmund's riders reappeared behind them, lanterns scattering through the trees. Returning was impossible. Cross one horse at a time, Eliza ordered. The coachman hesitated, looking to Nathaniel for confirmation. Nathaniel did not take the decision from her. Obey the Duchess. He and the footman climbed down to lead the horses. Each wheel groaned over the wet planks. Halfway across, the river struck the bridge, supports hard enough to shake the carriage. Clara clutched the seat. Eliza watched Nathaniel walking in the freezing water beside the led horse, one hand on the bridle, and the other braced against the carriage. 6 months earlier, he had refused to descend a staircase when she begged him to inspect a signature. Now, he risked being swept beneath the river to preserve evidence that might condemn his own judgment. The act mattered, but it did not erase the choice that had made it necessary. They reached the opposite bank as Edmund's riders arrived at the bridge. One attempted to follow too quickly. The first plank split beneath his horse, forcing the others back. Eliza allowed herself one breath of relief. Ashcombe Chapel is 2 miles north, she said. We still may reach it before the trustees disperse. If the meeting is real, Clara whispered. Eliza opened the blue ledger again. A folded scrap protruded from the damaged spine, narrower than the other pages. She eased it free. It was not an account, but a list of 6 names. 3 belonged to Harcourt trustees. 1 was Mr. Vale. Another was Julian Cross. Beside the final name appeared a sum of £10,000, and the words upon confirmation of widowhood. Eliza read it twice. Widowhood? Nathaniel asked. The carriage fell silent. The attack had not been intended to kill them on the road, yet someone expected Eliza to become a widow. She turned the paper over. On the reverse, in her mother's handwriting, were 2 instructions. Bring the Duke to the chapel. Keep the wife alive until he signs. Clara began to tremble. They knew he would come for you. No, Eliza said, studying the sequence more carefully. They knew he would come for his seal. The forged petition was bait for Nathaniel, just as the leather case had been bait for her. At Ashcombe, Vale would place a document before the Duke, something requiring his signature, while witnesses watched. Eliza checked the list again and recognized the final name. Sir Roland Mercer, a creditor who had attempted to purchase the Blackmere ironworks 3 years earlier. Nathaniel had refused him. This is not about my dowry alone, she said. They mean to use the false marriage petition to challenge every transfer you made after our wedding. Your loans, your tenant protections, even the trust securing your sister's home could be suspended. Nathaniel understood the consequence at once. Mercer would force Blackmere into default and buy the unentailed properties through Vale. The trees thinned ahead. Ashcombe Chapel appeared on the hill, every window blazing with candlelight. Too many carriages waited outside for a private trustees' meeting. Armed men stood beside the entrance, and above the chapel door hung a black-bordered notice bearing the Blackmere crest. The coachman stopped at the edge of the graveyard. Eliza stepped down before Nathaniel could lift her. The notice announced the death of Nathaniel Ashford, Duke of Blackmere, at 11:45 that night. Beneath it, a second line declared his estranged wife the sole suspect in his murder. Nathaniel tore the notice from the chapel door, but Eliza caught his wrist before he could crush it. Do not destroy their evidence. She examined the ink beneath the carriage lamp. The announcement had been prepared before the supposed hour of death, yet the black border remained dry, while the final line naming her as the murderer still shone wet. Someone inside had added it only moments ago. Eliza folded the notice and gave it to Clara. Keep this against your skin. If they take the case, they must not find this. Nathaniel looked toward the armed men beside the entrance. You cannot go inside. That is precisely what they expect you to say. They have accused you of murder. Then let the dead man escort his murderer. She placed her injured hand through his arm and walked beside him across the graveyard. Clara remained in the carriage with the notice, guarded by the coachman and footman. At the chapel steps, 2 constables lowered their staffs. Between them stood Mr. Vale, Eliza's mother's solicitor, his silver spectacles reflecting the candlelight. His expression faltered when he saw Nathaniel alive, but the surprise vanished almost immediately. Your Grace, thank heaven. We received word that Lady Blackmere's accomplices had attacked your carriage. Nathaniel held up the bullet-torn edge of his coat. Your riders? Vale pressed a hand to his chest. Certainly not. Lord Edmund rode out only after learning his sister had abducted a servant and stolen confidential records. He looked at the leather case beneath Eliza's arm. There they are. You ordered Clara to burn them, Eliza said. A confused kitchen maid has made several wild allegations. Then why announce my husband's death before examining his body? Vale glanced at the torn notice in Nathaniel's hand, unaware that the more revealing original was hidden with Clara. A regrettable precaution based upon false information, nothing more. The chapel doors opened behind him. Inside, 6 trustees sat at a long table, placed before the altar. Lady Harcourt occupied the front pew, her dark gown untouched by the rain. Edmund stood beside her, though Eliza had last seen him trapped on the opposite side of the broken bridge. He must have taken the main road, while his hired riders pursued the carriage. Near the trustees sat Sir Rowland Mercer, broad and red-faced, with a packet of loan certificates arranged before him. At the far end of the table, Nathaniel's secretary, Julian Cross, held a pen above a waiting document. Cross rose too quickly. "Your Grace." "We feared the worst." Nathaniel's gaze settled on the signet ring upon his secretary's hand. It was not the missing ducal ring, but Eliza noticed the black stain packed beneath Cross's thumbnail, the same charcoal dust found inside the leather case. "Did you?" Nathaniel asked. Cross lowered his hand. "Vale recovered first. Since his Grace lives, the allegation of murder is irrelevant. Yet the question of Lady Blackmere's fraud remains. We have assembled the trustees to examine records recovered from her possession." Eliza placed the blue ledger upon the table. A murmur passed through the chapel. Lady Harcourt smiled faintly, believing her daughter had obeyed the trap. "This document records thousands of pounds withdrawn in my name," Eliza said. "It also contains copied signatures, false recipients, and pages designed to implicate me." Sir Rowland leaned forward. "You admit possessing it. I admit bringing it here so every man present may see how poorly it was made." She opened the ledger to the £8,000 withdrawal. "Mr. Cross, you served as witness to this payment, did you not?" His name appeared beneath the entry. "I witnessed the Duchess receive the draft at Blackmere House." "On the 3rd of March?" "Yes." Eliza turned to one of the older trustees, Reverend Samuel Whitcomb, who had known her father and had attended her wedding. "Reverend, where was I on that date?" Whitcomb hesitated beneath Vale's stare. Then he looked at the bruises on Eliza's face. "At Harcourt House. I brought you a prayer book that afternoon, but Lady Harcourt would not allow me to speak with you privately. A small victory, but the first truth spoken aloud within that room." Eliza pushed the ledger toward Cross. "Then either you witnessed a woman who was not me, or the entry was written afterward." Cross's confidence weakened. "I may have mistaken the date. My father's ledgers were chronological. If the date is mistaken, every later page must also be examined." Vale stepped forward. "This theatrical questioning proves nothing. Lady Blackmere understands accounts well enough to create precisely such inconsistencies." "Then, let us examine something she could not create," Nathaniel said. His ruined voice filled the chapel with unexpected force. He placed the wooden copying frame beside the ledger. Cross stared at the craftsman's burned crescent, and his face lost all colour. Vale immediately reached for it, but Eliza covered the frame with her hand. "You recognize this mark, Mr. Cross?" "No." "Your Grace found an identical tool in my rooms last year," Eliza said, watching Nathaniel rather than the secretary. "You accused me of copying your private correspondence. Where is that tool now?" Nathaniel's expression tightened. He remembered the evening clearly. Cross had discovered the frame inside Eliza's writing desk 2 weeks before the false letters appeared. Eliza had insisted she had never seen it. Nathaniel had refused to summon the servants who cleaned her room. Instead, he had permitted Cross to lock the object inside the cabinet beside his desk. "In my study," he said. "A cabinet to which Cross has the only duplicate key." The secretary's eyes moved toward the side door. Nathaniel saw it. For 6 months, he had chosen Cross's explanation over his wife's. Now the same decision stood before him again. Cross withdrew a folded letter from his coat. "Your Grace, before you condemn a loyal servant, you should read what your wife wrote to Lord Mercer 3 days before your wedding." He placed the letter on the table. It bore Eliza's handwriting and declared her intention to marry Nathaniel, gain access to Blackmere's private lands, and transfer them to Mercer through the Harcourt Trust. Nathaniel picked it up. Every person in the chapel watched him, waiting for his old suspicion to overcome the evidence once more. Eliza said nothing. She would not beg him to believe her again. This time, he would either examine the letter or lose her by his own choice. Nathaniel carried the letter to the nearest candle. He did not look first at the signature, as he had 6 months earlier. He examined the fold, held the paper against the light, and rubbed the ink carefully between his fingers. Eliza watched the struggle in his face as memory confronted habit. "The handwriting resembles hers," Cross said. "Resemblance is not proof," Nathaniel answered. He placed the letter beside one of the authentic notes Eliza had written before their marriage. Her capital B begins below the line. This one begins above it. Vale laughed softly. A woman skilled in accounts could alter her own hand. Nathaniel turned the forged letter over. Then she also manufactured paper carrying the Blackmere mill mark 3 months before Blackmere purchased that mill. Silence spread through the chapel. Eliza had not noticed the watermark, but Nathaniel had. It was the first time he had used his knowledge to test an accusation rather than strengthen it. Cross back toward the side door. A constable blocked him, though the man still looked uncertain whom he was expected to arrest. Sir Roland Mercer rose from his chair. One doubtful letter does not erase the financial evidence, nor does it explain why the Duchess arrived carrying a case filled with instruments for copying the Duke's seal. Because you arranged for her to find it, Eliza said. Mercer's heavy face reddened. Take care. You expected me to defend myself with evidence already marked as mine, but your people made one mistake. They prepared the death notice too soon. She looked toward the chapel entrance. Clara, the young maid, stepped inside between the coachman and Nathaniel's footman. Her hands shook, but she held the original notice above her head. Reverend Whitcomb took it from her and compared the wet final line with the dry border. The accusation was added recently, he confirmed. Lady Harcourt rose. A servant's possession proves nothing. That girl stole private documents and attacked my son. Clara's courage faltered beneath the older woman's stare. Eliza crossed the aisle and stood beside her. Tell them what you saw. Mr. Vale and Mr. Cross copied letters in the old laundry, Clara whispered. Lord Edmund brought them the Duke's seal. When I refused to burn the leather case, they locked me away. Edmund strode forward. Liar. His raised hand never reached Clara. Eliza stepped between them and caught his wrist. Pain shot through her injured palm, but she did not release him. You will never strike a woman for speaking the truth again. Nathaniel moved to her side, yet he allowed Eliza to force her brother's arm down herself. Edmund stared at the sister, who had once lowered her eyes whenever he entered a room. Something in that old power had broken. Vale closed his papers with deliberate calm. An emotional display cannot settle a question of fraud. Until a magistrate examines these allegations, Lady Blackmere must remain under lawful restraint. At his signal, the constables approached Eliza. Nathaniel drew his sword cane. Steel whispered through the candlelight. Both men stopped. Touch her, he said, and answer to me. Your title cannot obstruct an inquiry, Mercer replied. However, there is a reasonable alternative. He slid the waiting document across the table. Sign this acknowledgement placing the disputed Blackmere properties under temporary receivership. In return, no charge will be filed against your wife tonight. The trustees will conduct an orderly examination, and if she is innocent, everything will be restored. Eliza read the first lines and immediately understood. The document did not merely preserve the properties. It transferred control of the rents, tenant contracts, ironworks, revenues, and household payroll to a receiver selected by Mercer. The arrangement would continue until every claim against the marriage settlement had been resolved, a process Vale could prolong for years. No, she said. He wants Blackmere, without purchasing it. Mercer smiled. I want security for unpaid loans. Loans created by withdrawals entered in a false ledger. A claim you may prove during the inquiry. Vale turned to the constables. Until then, remove Lady Blackmere. One of them took Eliza's arm. Nathaniel struck the man's hand away with the flat of his blade. Chaos erupted. Edmund shouted for the chapel guards. Clara screamed. Reverend Whitcomb demanded order. Nathaniel seized the receivership document and reached for the pen. Eliza covered it with her hand. If you sign, Mercer controls every account. If I do not, they take you. Then let them. A magistrate must record the charge, the evidence, and the hour. That record could expose them. They beat you beneath your mother's roof while I believed you were sheltered. I will not hand you to another locked room. This is not protection if you silence my choice. His gaze fell upon the bruises around her wrist. Fear overcame judgment. The same fear of scandal and loss that Cross had exploited 6 months earlier, now disguised as devotion. I can recover property, he said. I cannot risk your life. Nathaniel, listen to me. But he had already signed. The instant his pen left the paper, Mercer pressed his seal beside the signature. Vale handed copies to two waiting clerks, who hurried through separate doors. Lady Harcourt sat down, with a satisfied smile. Eliza looked at her husband, and the terrible simplicity of the trap became clear. Nathaniel had finally believed she was innocent, yet he still believed his authority mattered more than her judgment. "What have you done?" she whispered. From somewhere beyond the chapel walls, a bell began to ring, once for the Blackmere ironworks, twice for the Southern Tenant Farms, 3 times for the Widows' Trust protecting Nathaniel's sister. Each bell confirmed that Mercer's men had been waiting at every property for the signed order. Vale leaned close enough for Nathaniel alone to hear, though Eliza caught every word. "Thank you, Your Grace. Your wife was never the prize. She was merely the hand we used to make you surrender everything." The bell continued until the chapel seemed to vibrate with it. Nathaniel reached for the receivership document, but Mercer folded it and placed it inside his coat. "You signed before 6 witnesses and 2 trustees. You cannot withdraw merely because you dislike the result." "The signature was obtained under coercion," Eliza said. Vale adjusted his spectacles. "His Grace chose freely between an inquiry and temporary protection of the estate. You threatened to imprison his wife. A lawful inquiry is not a threat." Nathaniel moved toward him, but Eliza stepped between them. Anger would give Vale another weapon. She looked instead at the 2 clerks who had carried copies away. "How long have your men been positioned at Blackmere?" Mercer smiled. "Long enough." That answer revealed more than he intended. The receivership order could not have reached 3 distant properties in the few minutes since Nathaniel signed. Mercer's agents had arrived earlier carrying sealed instructions, needing only the signal from the chapel bell to act. The scheme had been prepared before Nathaniel made his choice, but his signature gave it legal appearance. Eliza turned to Reverend Whitcomb. "You witnessed the order being signed after midnight?" "I did." "And the bells rang less than a minute later?" "Yes." "Then record both facts in the parish register before anyone leaves." Vale objected, but Whitcomb closed the Bible before him and drew the register from beneath the table. "The parish records what occurs within its walls." For the first time, Mercer's smile disappeared. Eliza could not undo Nathaniel's signature that night, but she could create a neutral record, proving the seizures had been arranged in advance. She looked at the trustees. "You may surrender the accounts if you wish. You will not surrender the tenants without notice." "They are not your tenants now," Lady Harcourt said. Eliza turned toward her mother. "They were never possessions. That is the difference between father's trust and what you have made of it." A crash sounded outside. Clara ran to the chapel doors. In the graveyard, flames rose beyond the trees in the direction of Blackmere village. The ironworks horn began to sound one long blast, followed by 3 short alarms. Nathaniel's face hardened. "The workers' cottages." Mercer did not deny it. "My receiver is clearing properties that cannot support their debts." "At 1 in the morning?" Eliza demanded. "Before families can remove their children. Efficiency is rarely comfortable." Nathaniel seized Mercer by the coat, but Sir Rowland's guards raised their pistols. Eliza pulled her husband back. "If you strike him, he will have you detained and claim the estate lacks lawful leadership." Nathaniel released Mercer, breathing hard through the pain in his throat. "Then tell me what to do." It was the first time he had asked rather than decided. Eliza looked again at the fire. Her father had taught her that accounts were not numbers alone. Every line represented seed, medicine, wages, roofs, and winter bread. Mercer would seize cash first, suspend payroll second, and force frightened tenants to sign new leases before they learned the receivership could be challenged. "We go to the village," she said. "Not Blackmere House. Mercer wants you there, defending silver and portraits, while his men scatter the people who can testify to the true rents." She faced Reverend Whitcomb. "Will you bring the register?" "I will." "Clara, remain with him. Do not let Vale separate you." The young maid nodded, though fear still shook her shoulders. Nathaniel followed Eliza into the rain. Lady Harcourt called after them. "You cannot save people who no longer belong to you." Eliza did not turn around. "Watch me." They reached Blackmere village before Mercer's men had chained the ironworks gates and posted eviction notices upon 12 cottages. Women stood barefoot in the mud, holding children wrapped in blankets. A foreman argued with armed guards, while smoke poured from a storehouse beside the works. The fire had begun, when a lantern was knocked over during the seizure, and now it threatened the coal shed. If the flames reached it, half the village would burn. Nathaniel moved toward the workers, but several men stepped back. 6 months earlier, when Eliza disappeared, he had allowed Cross to dismiss 3 foremen who questioned the new accounts. The villagers no longer trusted his title. Eliza climbed onto an overturned cart. "Listen to me." The noise diminished. "The receiver has control of the accounts, not your lives. Take every child and elderly person to St. Anne's Meadow beyond the river. The stone wall will stop the fire. Do not sign new leases. Do not surrender rent receipts. Bring them with you." Mercer's appointed bailiff approached. "By order of Sir Rowland, no tenant may remove property from these cottages." Eliza held up her bandaged hand. "Receipts are personal evidence, not estate property. Touch one, and Reverend Whitcomb will record the theft." The bailiff hesitated when he saw the clergyman arriving behind her with the parish register beneath his coat. That hesitation was enough. Families began moving toward the meadow. Nathaniel removed his coat and joined the bucket line without command or ceremony. For nearly an hour, he carried water beside men who would not meet his eyes. Eliza organized the women into 2 groups, one moving children, the other emptying flour and lamp oil from the threatened cottages. Her ribs ached with every breath, but she refused to stop. At last, the fire collapsed inward, leaving the coal shed untouched. A cheer rose from the meadow. It was a small victory, purchased not by rank but by cooperation. Then the ironworks foreman came running with a locked cash box. "Your Grace." The receiver emptied the payroll safe before the fire. 200 families are owed wages tomorrow. Nathaniel looked at Eliza. His private accounts were included in Mercer's receivership. He had no legal access to enough money. Eliza opened the cash box and found only a handful of coins. But beneath the tray lay the original weekly wage sheets, bearing the workers' signatures. Several names had also appeared as false recipients in the blue ledger. The theft from her trust and the theft from Blackmere were the same operation. "Mercer has been moving money through dead workers and dismissed tenants," she said. "The people he is evicting are the witnesses who can prove it." The foreman's face tightened. "Then he will destroy the wage books next." "Where are the older volumes?" "In the counting room at the ironworks." Eliza looked toward the chained gates. Armed guards now stood before them, and smoke still hid the rear wall. "How long before Mercer can remove them?" The foreman checked the eastern sky, where the first grey line of dawn had appeared. "His wagons arrive at sunrise." Eliza closed the cash box. Less than 2 hours remained to enter an estate she no longer controlled, recover records Mercer intended to destroy, and find wages for 200 families. Nathaniel reached for the key hanging from the foreman's belt, but Eliza took it first. "You have made 2 choices for me," she told her husband. "There will not be a third. If you come with me now, you follow my plan." Nathaniel lowered his head. "I will follow." Eliza studied him for a moment, searching for resistance hidden beneath obedience. There was none. She gave the foreman a different task. "Mr. Hale, take Reverend Whitcomb and 6 workers to the meadow. Write down every family's name, unpaid wage, rent receipt number, and eviction notice. Each person must sign or make a mark beside the entry. Keep 2 identical copies with different witnesses." Hale nodded and hurried away. Nathaniel looked toward the chained ironworks gates. "The counting room is on the 2nd floor. We cannot reach it without being seen. We will not use the gates." Eliza led him behind the burned storehouse to a stone channel half hidden beneath brambles. Years earlier, waste water from the cooling tanks had flooded 3 tenant gardens. Eliza had redesigned the drainage path and persuaded the workers to build an inspection tunnel beneath the rear wall. Cross later claimed the improvement as his own, and Nathaniel had praised him for saving the estate, hundreds of pounds. "You designed this?" Nathaniel asked, as she removed the iron grate with the foreman's key. "I designed half the improvements you congratulated Cross for making." She crawled into the tunnel before he could answer. The passage was narrow, wet, and black with soot. Nathaniel followed without complaint. At the far end, they emerged behind an unused furnace inside the works. Mercer's guards stood near the front gate, watching the road for the wagons. Eliza and Nathaniel crossed the silent production floor and climbed the rear stairs. The counting room door had already been forced. Inside, drawers lay open, and papers covered the floor. The wage books were gone. Nathaniel cursed beneath his breath. But Eliza moved directly to the wall, where a large production chart hung beside the clerk's desk. Mercer's men took the official volumes because they knew what those books contained. They did not know how the weekly figures were checked. She lifted the chart and revealed dozens of narrow paper strips pinned behind it. Every Friday, the clerks added the workers' signed wage totals and compared them with the furnace output. Eliza had ordered the strips preserved after noticing that Cross's quarterly accounts never matched the amount of iron produced. These show what was actually paid, she said. The blue ledger shows what was falsely withdrawn. When the same names appear in both, we can trace every stolen pound. Nathaniel touched one strip, dated nearly a year earlier. Eliza's initials appeared beside a correction, saving 30 families from an improper rent increase. How long did you know that money was disappearing? 11 months. I suspected Cross, but I lacked proof of who received it. 3 weeks before you sent me away, I found payments moving from Blackmere into the Harcourt Trust and then into Mercer's loans. Why did you not tell me? She turned on him. I did. At breakfast, in your library, and in 2 letters placed directly upon your desk. You told me estate accounts were not a suitable occupation for your wife. Cross called my figures confused, and you accepted his word. Nathaniel closed his eyes. No apology could make that memory less exact. I remember. Good. Remorse is useless if it edits the past. She gathered the paper strips into chronological bundles, tying each with cord from the clerk's desk. Nathaniel removed a silver flask from his coat, emptied it, and pressed the engraved base into sealing wax over each knot. His private crest would show if anyone opened the bundles. The receivership may give Mercer the right to these premises, he said, but not the right to destroy evidence of fraud. For once, we agree. Footsteps sounded below. Mercer's wagons had arrived early. Eliza counted at least 8 men entering the works. Escape through the tunnel while carrying all the records would be slow. She divided the bundles. You take the production strips through the drainage channel. Nathaniel refused with a shake of his head. We go together. That is not my plan. I will not abandon you again. You are not being asked to abandon me. You are being asked to trust me. She handed him half the bundles. Carry these to Reverend Whitcomb. Have him record the seals and place them inside the parish chest. Then return with witnesses. I will remain here and find the link to Mercer. Nathaniel's hands tightened around the records. If they discover you, they already believe I am frightened, injured, and dependent upon you. Let that mistake serve us. She held his gaze. If you cannot obey a decision that risks me, then you still do not see me as your equal. The footsteps reached the lower stairs. Nathaniel wanted to argue. Instead, he concealed the bundles beneath his coat and went to the rear passage. Before entering it, he stopped. I sent you back because believing Cross allowed me to protect my pride. I called it duty. It was cowardice. Eliza felt the words strike somewhere deeper than she wished to admit, but she did not soften. Then prove you have changed by doing what I asked. He disappeared into the tunnel. Eliza returned to the clerk's desk. The payment strips proved stolen wages, but not where the money ended. She searched beneath the drawers and found a row of dust marks, showing that one small book had recently been removed. On the floor lay a torn corner of green paper, the distinctive wrapping used by Mercer's private bank. She followed a trail of scraps toward the furnace office, where the safe stood open. Inside remained a single deposit receipt for £10,000, transferred from the Blackmere payroll account to an unidentified holder designated M.H. The initials could mean Mercer Holdings, but that inference would not survive scrutiny. Eliza held the receipt against the morning light and noticed a second impression beneath the ink. Whoever completed it had written on top of another sheet. Using charcoal from the cold furnace, she dusted the paper and revealed the missing name. Margaret Harcourt, her mother. The entire scheme led not merely to Mercer or Cross, but to the woman who had watched Edmund beat her. Eliza folded the receipt into her bodice, just as the counting room door opened. Edmund entered with Julian Cross and 4 armed guards. In Cross's hands were the wage books they had supposedly removed and a burning candle. "Thank you for finding the one document we missed," her brother said. "Now give it to me, and I may let the workers believe you died in the fire." Eliza kept both hands visible. "If you intended to kill me, Edmund, you would not be bargaining for the receipt." His eyes dropped toward her bodice, confirming that he knew exactly where she had hidden it. Cross placed the candle against the nearest wage book. "Give it to us, and allow you to burn 200 families' wages." "Those books are already condemned," Cross said. "The receiver will issue corrected accounts." Corrected means erased. Edmund closed the door behind him. Smoke from the earlier fire still hung in the corridor, making another blaze easy to blame on accident. Eliza glanced toward the high windows. Workers had gathered beyond the locked gates, but no one could see into the counting room. Nathaniel would not return before the records at the parish were secured. She was alone, exactly as she had chosen to be. "Very well," she said. "I will give you the receipt, but first I want the truth. Why did Mother help Mercer steal from Father's trust?" Edmund laughed. "You still imagine Father left you a sacred inheritance. He left debts. Mother discovered them after his death and borrowed from Mercer to preserve Harcourt House. Then why not sell the property? Because the Harcourt name is worth more than tenants, workers, or an unwanted daughter's marriage." His contempt loosened his tongue. "Mercer offered to cancel the debt if we gave him access to Blackmere. All we required was a husband proud enough to believe his wife capable of betrayal." Cross's face tightened. "You have said enough." Eliza understood their division. Cross was careful. Edmund was vain. One had designed the forgery, while the other needed to boast that it had succeeded. "And my mother?" she asked. "Did she order you to beat me because I found the transfers, or because she always hated that Father trusted me with the accounts?" Edmund crossed the space between them and slapped her. The force turned her face toward the window, but Eliza remained standing. "She ordered me to obtain your confession. I chose the method." That distinction mattered. He had admitted his own agency, just as Nathaniel would eventually have to admit his. Eliza tasted blood and smiled. "Thank you." Edmund's triumph wavered. She drew the deposit receipt from her bodice and held it above the candle flame. Cross lunged forward. Eliza released the paper. It fell not into his hand, but into the open water pitcher upon the desk. Ink bled across the surface. Cross overturned the pitcher and seized the soaked receipt. But the impressed name beneath the writing began dissolving into grey streaks. "Fool!" Edmund shouted. Eliza stepped backward. "You cannot burn what is already wet." Cross examined the ruined paper and smiled. "Nor can you prove what it said." The counting room door burst inward. Nathaniel entered with Reverend Whitcomb, Mr. Hale, and 6 ironworkers. Cross immediately dropped the candle. Edmund pointed at Eliza. She attempted to burn the wage books. We stopped her. The guards repeated the accusation before anyone could question them. Cross displayed the wet receipt. She also destroyed a bank record after we discovered it concealed upon her person. Nathaniel looked at Eliza's bleeding lip, then at Edmund's reddened knuckles. Every instinct urged him toward violence, but Eliza shook her head once. He stopped. "You will answer publicly," he told Edmund. His voice was barely audible, yet no one mistook the promise. Cross lifted the wage books. "These records belong to the receiver. Any attempt to remove them violates the order His Grace signed." Reverend Whitcomb confirmed that the sealed production strips were secured in the parish chest, but without the wage books and deposit receipt, they showed discrepancies rather than theft. Mercer's men entered behind him, carrying the receivership document. They ordered everyone from the counting room and sealed the door. By sunrise, notices appeared throughout the village declaring that Lady Blackmere had been caught destroying financial evidence. The story spread faster than the truth. At 9, Mercer held an assembly outside the ironworks and announced that wages would remain suspended until the Duchess surrendered all stolen trust funds. Hungry families who had trusted Eliza hours earlier now looked at her with uncertainty. Vale produced the ruined receipt and claimed the missing ink had named Eliza as the recipient. Lady Harcourt stood beside him, dressed in mourning grey, presenting herself as a mother broken by her daughter's crimes. "My husband warned me she possessed an unhealthy appetite for control," she told the villagers. "I defended her for years, but I can no longer protect her from the consequences of her choices." Edmund stood behind her with his injured hand concealed in a glove. Nathaniel climbed onto the stone platform before Mercer could stop him. "The Duchess did not deceive me," he said. The effort tore through his damaged throat. Several people strained to hear. He forced his voice louder. "I deceived myself." Silence settled over the yard. He named every choice. trusting Cross, without comparison, refusing Eliza's accounts, sending her to Harcourt House, allowing her letters to be intercepted, and signing the receivership after she warned him not to. Each admission weakened his authority, invited questions about his judgment, and damaged the reputation upon which his creditors relied. Mercer tried to interrupt, but Nathaniel continued until blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. If Blackmere falls, it falls because I placed pride above evidence and control above my wife's consent. Do not punish her for my failure. The declaration did not restore the missing wages or disprove the forged accounts, but it ended Mercer's attempt to hide behind the Duke's honor. The villagers no longer looked at Eliza with certainty of guilt. They looked between both sides and waited. Nathaniel stepped down, unsteady. Eliza caught his arm before he fell, then released it once he regained his balance. You did not have to defend me, he whispered. I protected the truth of what happened, not you. Vale approached with a formal summons. At noon the following day, the county magistrate would hear Mercer's petition to confirm permanent control of the disputed properties. Unless Eliza produced authentic proof before then, the temporary receivership would become enforceable for the duration of the fraud inquiry. After Vale left, Eliza stared at the ruined receipt. The impress name was gone, the wage books were sealed inside the works, and Cross had control of every official account. Then she noticed a thin green stain upon his discarded handkerchief, where he had wiped the wet paper. The original bank ink had transferred to the cloth, but only portions of 3 letters remained: G, A, and R. Not enough to prove Margaret Harcourt, but enough to create fear in someone who believed the receipt had survived. Eliza looked toward her mother, who was climbing into Mercer's carriage. They think I need the document, she said. I do not. I need Mother to reveal knowledge she could possess, only if her name was written upon it. Nathaniel followed her gaze. How? Eliza folded the stained handkerchief and placed it inside the empty leather case. Tomorrow, before the magistrate, I will present this as the preserved receipt. Tonight, we make certain my mother hears that its full inscription can still be read. If she orders someone to steal it, she confirms the one fact we cannot yet prove. At the edge of the crowd, Clara suddenly cried out. 2 constables were dragging her into Vale's carriage. Mercer had discovered that the maid was their only living witness, and he did not intend to let her survive until noon. Nathaniel stepped toward the carriage, but Eliza stopped him. If you seize Clara by force, Vale will accuse you of interfering with a witness. The constables pushed the girl inside and locked the door. Clara struck the window with both hands. Vale smiled as if daring the Duke to act. Eliza raised her voice so the gathered workers could hear. Under what charge are you holding her? Theft of private documents, Vale replied. Then state the destination where she will be detained. He hesitated. The county gaol. That road runs east. Your carriage is facing south. Heads turned toward the horses. Vale's expression tightened. Reverend Whitcomb stepped between the constables and the driver. As a witness summoned to tomorrow's hearing, the girl is entitled to arrive alive and uncoerced. I will accompany her. You have no authority over my carriage, Vale said. Perhaps not, Whitcomb answered, opening the door and climbing in beside Clara. But now 20 people have heard where you claim to be taking her. Vale could not drag a clergyman out before an entire village. He ordered the driver east. Eliza sent Mr. Hale and 2 workers behind them on horseback, with instructions to note every stop and speak to the gaoler before Clara was admitted. The witness was not free, but she was no longer invisible. Nathaniel watched the carriage disappear. You anticipated this. I anticipated that frightened men remove witnesses before they destroy documents. And the leather case? We let Mother believe it contains the surviving receipt. Eliza handed it to Nathaniel in full view of Lady Harcourt's retreating carriage. Take it to the parish chest. Ask Reverend Whitcomb's curate to lock it beside the sealed records and announce that only the magistrate may open it. Nathaniel understood. Your mother will send someone. Yes, but the case must remain untouched. I need her to reveal what she fears is inside, not merely attempt to steal it. By evening, word had spread that charcoal treatment had restored every letter upon the ruined bank receipt. Eliza repeated the claim to no one directly. She allowed the ironworks foreman to whisper it near Mercer's bailiff, then let the bailiff carry the rumour where fear would sharpen it. Before midnight, A boy arrived at St. Anne's Meadow with a message addressed to Edmund. Mr. Hale intercepted him and brought the sealed note to Eliza without opening it. The handwriting belonged to Lady Harcourt. The green bank receipt must not be shown. Take the parish case before noon and ensure the maid remembers nothing. It was powerful evidence of guilty knowledge, but Eliza needed more than handwriting that Cross might call forged. She resealed the note with warm wax and allowed the boy to continue. Why surrender it? Nathaniel asked. Because now Edmund will obey. At dawn, workers concealed themselves inside the vestry and behind the yew wall, beside the chapel. Reverend Whitcomb returned from the county gaol with Clara and a written statement from the gaoler, confirming that Vale's constables had attempted to take her elsewhere. The girl was exhausted, but unharmed. Eliza embraced her only after asking permission. You do not have to testify. Clara looked toward Lady Harcourt's distant carriage. If I remain silent, they will do this to another girl. At 11, the county magistrate convened the hearing inside Ashcombe Chapel, because the parish hall could not hold the workers, tenants, creditors, and trustees who demanded admission. Mercer attacked first. He produced the blue ledger, the forged letter to himself, the copying frame, and the ruined bank receipt. Cross testified that all had been found in Eliza's possession. Edmund claimed she had confessed privately to stealing the Harcourt trust and had attacked him when he attempted to stop her. Lady Harcourt wept as she described years spent protecting an unstable daughter. Even last night, she said, Eliza spread the cruel rumor that my own name appeared upon a bank receipt. She will forge anything to escape justice. Eliza looked at the magistrate. I have never publicly stated whose name appeared upon that receipt. Lady Harcourt's tears stopped. A murmur passed through the chapel. My mother has just supplied information known only to the person named on the document, the person who prepared it, and those who destroyed it. Vale rose. An inference built upon gossip. Then let us examine actions instead. Reverend Whitcomb presented the mother's note, the gaoler's statement, and the parish register recording that Mercer's seizure had been arranged before Nathaniel signed. Edmund denied receiving the note. At Eliza's signal, Mr. Hale opened the side door. The messenger boy entered and identified Edmund as the man who paid him at dawn. Two workers then testified that they watched Edmund and Cross break into the vestry seeking the leather case. They had not arrested the men because Eliza instructed them to preserve the scene. The magistrate ordered the case brought forward. Vale's confidence returned when it was opened. Inside lay only Cross's green-stained handkerchief. A piece of cloth, he said. No receipt, no proof. It proves Mr. Cross handled the document while its ink was wet, Eliza replied. But the receipt was designed to disappear. The accounting trail was not. Reverend Whitcomb placed Nathaniel's sealed production strips upon the table. Mr. Hale supplied the workers' duplicate wage statements and rent receipts. Eliza matched 12 names in the blue ledger to men who had died before the dates of their supposed withdrawals. 6 more belonged to workers Cross had dismissed, though payments continued in their names. Every false amount corresponded to money removed from the payroll account. Mercer argued that the figures showed only careless bookkeeping. Eliza agreed. Numbers reveal theft, not the thief. Access reveals the thief. She placed the wooden copying frame beside Cross's duplicate cabinet key. Clara testified that she had seen Cross use both in the Harcourt laundry, while Vale dictated Nathaniel's letters. Cross called her a liar. Nathaniel then presented the authentic frame, recovered from his locked Blackmere cabinet that morning. It bore the same craftsman's mark, but a different series of punctures. The frame found in Eliza's case had been created from Cross's private copy, not hers. Vale's face changed for the first time. Eliza turned to Sir Rowland. You claimed the receivership was improvised to protect creditors after I arrived at the chapel. Yet your agents stood at 3 properties beforehand, and the bells triggered simultaneous seizures. You also prepared a notice of Nathaniel's death without a body. That means your plan required him to sign under fear, then become legally or physically incapable of challenging you. Mercer struck the table. Speculation. Then answer one simple question. Who informed you, before 11:45, that the Duke would travel from Harcourt House to Ashcombe Chapel? Mercer looked toward Vale. Vale looked toward Cross. Neither answered. Eliza approached her mother. and placed the torn parchment bearing Nathaniel's seal before her. You ordered Edmund to force my confession before midnight. You knew the petition, the receivership, the false death notice, and the green bank transfer would meet here. Yet you claim you were merely protecting a troubled daughter. Lady Harcourt lifted her chin. You have proven nothing against me. Not yet. Eliza unfolded the black-bordered notice and placed it beside Lady Harcourt's note. But both were written with the same unusual ink iron gall mixed with green copper salts, used by only one private stationer in this county. The stationer keeps a numbered ledger of every purchaser. The chapel doors opened. An elderly merchant entered carrying that ledger beneath his arm. Lady Harcourt rose so quickly that her chair fell backward. Eliza had forced the lie into a place where it could no longer retreat. Now only one name in the stationer's book remained to be read aloud.